Welcome to the Wireless Federation webinar and Thought Leadership series. Today we are doing a session on big data with Richard Benjamin from Telefonica.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Wireless Federation webinar on big data, where we're going to talk about telco best practices and learnings on big data, internal and external. Today we've got an industry colleague and somebody I've known for the last decade or so, Richard Benjamin. He's currently the Chief AI and Data Strategist at Telefonica. He's previously held BI and big data roles at Telefonica. We're going to discuss 4 or 5 major themes with him today, understand his experience and his journey, essentially. So with that, welcome Richard to our big data talk today. Thank you so much for accepting our invite. It'd be great if you could start with a little introduction or background before we jump on to our themes. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jay, and hello everybody. For me, it's an honor and pleasure to be here and to share some of the experiences that I have learned in the past, let's say 15 years working with big data and more recently with artificial intelligence. So as Jay said, I'm currently in a strategic role at Telefonica, but I've also been in many operational and commercial roles, always related to creating value from big data. I was also the data group chief data officer at AXA, a large insurance company in many countries in the world. And actually what I've seen is that there are many common lessons to learn, even between different sectors. Yeah, everybody wants to use this kind of technology to create value from data in more sophisticated or less sophisticated ways, but almost all organizations go through the same journey to make that happen, because it's definitely not an easy journey. It takes many years, and that's why it's important to share those lessons that Jay already mentioned before.
Great. Thank you so much on that, Richard. So, Richard, I want to dive into our conversation straight away. Telefonica launched their big data platform, LUCA, which over time has become part of Telefonica Tech. Could you elaborate on what the journey has been and how things have shaped up at Telefonica over the last couple of years around big data? Thanks.
Yeah, yes, of course. So if you look at the LUCA story, LUCA, by the way, means the last universal common ancestor, and it refers to that the last universal common ancestor of all life on Earth. Yeah, so every single life on Earth is coming back to that cell or organism.
Right.
And at that time, we thought that data is going to be everywhere in the organizations into the future for the years to come. Yeah, so that was the name why it was chosen.
Right.
We wanted to use this as a vehicle to create value from the external use of data in a company. Yeah? So you have always internal usage to optimize your business, to do marketing.
Right.
But this was the part of external monetization of an asset, a new asset, which was data. Yeah. So
right.
LUCA started in 2016, more or less, as a business unit within Telefonica, focusing on the monetization of the assets we had in our data, anonymized, aggregate telco data, basically mobility data, footfall data, and activity in antennas. Yeah, at the high level. Yeah.
Right.
When we created LUCA, we also thought about what other things can we do with big data for other companies. Yeah, so we also set up kind of a consultancy area where we look at the data of the customers and to see if we could help them. Yeah, but always related and relating also to our own data to create a differential value. Yeah? So it's important to understand that this was not about internal use, but about helping others. So for our B2B market. It was a business unit sitting within the corporation, which happens often in large companies, that you first experiment at the corporate level, you work together with your local businesses, and then over time you try to grow that. Now, why did we create Telefonica Tech? It's actually a wider discussion, which if you are interested in Telefonica, you can learn why Telefonica took the decision to reorganize its whole business around 5 pillars, of which Telefonica Tech is one of them. There's also a Telefonica infrastructure. There is Telefonica in South America, Telefonica Hispam, and there are the 4 big countries where Telefonica operates. Yeah, Telefonica is a key part of that strategy, and actually it's one of the fastest growing parts. Yeah, it's the digital part. And within Telefonica, there is cloud and cybersecurity on one end, and on the other hand, there is IoT and big data, which is what LUCA has been formed. Yeah, the difference that it's been merged with IoT, because IoT is really a lot of sensors doing things, but basically it creates a lot of data. So we merge them together, and the big difference between with LUCA is also that now it's a separate legal entity. It's a company in itself. And before it was a business unit sitting in the operation. So a mixture of reasons, yeah, for one, financial reason, business reason, but also a market reason. Right,
sure. Just to kind of add and pick up your opinion on this one again, Telefonica Digital happened in 2016. In fact, we've now seen, we do a lot of research amongst telcos globally. We've now seen a lot of other operators starting their new entities and positioning it in a different way of helping enterprises and large organizations understand complex data and make use of that. I can think of a large telco in Asia, Richard, which is Excita, who'd also set up an arm called Excita Digital. What other telcos do you have in mind who've done something similar to what Telefonica is doing, and they've become very large or interesting, perhaps?
Well, I think several other telco companies have done similar things as Telefonica. Of course, actually, Telefonica started in 2011 thinking about this. Yeah,
right.
Experimented in 2012, 13, and 14, and set up an official unit in 2016. But I mean, if you look at telcos offering, let's say, mobile data insights, well, the big ones in Europe, they all do it. Yeah, Vodafone, Orange, Deutsche Telekom, Telenor, Telia. In Asia, as you say, yeah, also happening more in the Middle East. It's starting. South America a little bit. So I think all companies in the sector, they know they're sitting on a gold mine of data, but extracting this value is not as easy as you would think maybe from the beginning. Yeah, from very many different perspectives and reasons. But it's definitely happening.
Sure. Absolutely. Perfect. Also, let me now jump on, Richard, to my next question, which is, like you said, Middle East, it started to happen now, right? You're also seeing telcos in Brazil and South America who kind of now begun their journey, while Telia, Telenor, Telefonica, Vodafone are kind of leading this space. Do you think that big data opportunity for telcos is significantly different, Richard, for those in emerging markets vis-a-vis perhaps parts of Europe, right? What is your opinion on that?
Well, if you want to use, if you want to start doing external monetization, you need a certain maturity in terms of data. You need to have a platform, you need to know how to deal with privacy, how to share data in a secure way. You need to have conversations with the regulator for privacy reasons, and sometimes even with wider stakeholders, to journalists who might write about you. And I wouldn't say it depends on what kind of market you are in, because there can be a very advanced operator in the African or the Middle East, but it is a matter of maturity. You cannot start external monetization if you don't have your own house in order, because you sell insights generated from your data.
Right.
So most companies start with internal monetization, and they do that for some years. And when they understand, okay, we know how data works, we know the quality of the data, we are happy with it, then they start doing that. And of course, if you look across the world, it happens more often in developed countries than in low income or in middle income countries, but not per se. It's more a side effect or a consequence of how mature they are in data.
Yeah, so you're saying that irrespective of where you belong, it could be South Africa or Ghana or the UAE or Qatar, irrespective of that, big data can become big, and telcos start by
well, but of course, there's also the market, so there you can only do this. You need to have the maturity to be able to do it, but then the market needs to understand the value. Because it's a different way of doing things. So for instance, with this kind of information, you can work with public administrations or cities to optimize public transport. But that requires that the people who manage the public transport are interested and willing to look at this new kind of data, because usually they get it from surveys and they just plan it. So it's not only a matter of maturity, it's a necessary condition, but as a sufficient condition, you also need to have the market to be ready. And it might be that in more developed countries or high-income countries, the market is more advanced than in low-income or middle-income countries.
Makes sense. Maturity plays a big role. But if I was to put the same question on big data internal, right, where maturity does not play a big role, Richard, and at Telefonica Germany or Telefonica in another telco, let's say Brazil, Telefonica Germany is doing much better when it comes to internal big data as well as compared to another telco in Africa or South America. So, I mean, why doesn't the telco in Africa? Is it because of culture? Is it because of not having that need? Because at the end of the day, with internal, I'm able to leverage that information to be able to cross-sell, upsell, and boost my marketing KPIs, right? Or even CX for that matter. What have you experienced, right? Because you have a very large experience of managing this function across markets. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think the more competitive the market is, the more you need this technology. So if you are an emerging country where you can still just sell phones and people will buy it because then you don't need sophisticated infrastructure of data because there is a demand. But if the market is saturated, then of course you need more advanced technology to still be able to grow in that market, or even looking to new types of revenues and products which can be based on data. So it's a matter of competition and surviving. If you want to I mean, and now today in let's say in the more developed countries, if you're not using this kind of technology, then probably you're out of business soon,
sure,
because
sure.
you simply can't compete. So I think that's also a different factor. And of course, why is Germany more advanced than maybe a market in South America? That's exactly because of this reason.
Right. Fair enough. Perfect. Thank you for that, Richard. You talked about technology being important. What about the technology partner? So for telcos that have started their big data journey fairly recently, I mean, Telefonica did that 2010, 11, maybe before. Telcos that are now starting their journey or they began their journey 4 years back, what sort of technology partners or big data vendors do we need to look at? Are there any specific do's and don'ts, Richard? Is there a framework that one can use in selecting the right partner?
I'm not sure there is a one size fits all, but it is true that there are definitely lessons that you can learn. And I think the best way to explain this is explain different modes of operandus if you work with vendors. So one thing a company can do if they want to start with this but has no knowledge or capacity, say, okay, I'm going to do everything with a vendor, or a consultant. And actually, I don't care how it works. I just want it to happen, and they just outsource everything. Now, if that is your strategy, then that is fine. It is true that I don't know many telcos that going that strategy, because they all want to understand how it works. And if you really want to do this at a massive scale, then it is much better to have people internally who at least have deep knowledge to manage the vendors. Otherwise, you're completely in the hands of a vendor, and you depend on how good or bad they are. So what I see oftentimes is that it's a mixture of setting up an internal team, either by training existing employees or by hiring. Most usually it's a mix, and then start doing things. Sometimes working with an external vendor just to learn from the vendor while doing. And also always with the objective, okay, I want to learn, but in the end, I want to be in charge as a telco. Then if the telco becomes a bit more mature and they know how it works and they have a team, but at some point in time, there may be so much demand that they don't have the bandwidth. They have to prioritize. Now, at that moment, it becomes always, again, interesting to outsource some parts. Not because there is no knowledge, because just they want to scale it out.
Efficiency, sure.
Scale it out. Always with the objective to then internalize. So you have also this model: build, operate, and transfer. That's a bot approach. Where you let the vendor build it, operate it during some time, and once it's ready and it works, then you transfer it to the company, and they run it internally. Right. Of course, I think a very important do is that there should be a trusted relation. It should not be a vendor-client relation. It should be a partnership, because otherwise, as a telco, you end up renegotiating prices, so looking at a lot of details of contracts. And of course that works, but it takes a lot of effort, and actually it takes the effort away from really what you need to do, and that is doing use cases with data. So it's definitely better to have a trusted partnership with a certain company than just a specific project. You contract them and then you go to another vendor and then etc.
Right, sure. So you said build, operate, scale. I like that analogy. With that analogy, I want to get into big data as a service, Richard. My next theme or my next question. is big data as a service going to be as popular as, you know, the SaaS, the PAAS, right, or infrastructure as a service, right? So,
yeah, well,
yeah.
I definitely think it is, but I think it's somewhere between a PAAS and a SaaS. Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, there are you can have a big data PAAS, a platform as a service offering. Actually, all the hyperscalers, they provide that already. Software as a service is just one level up. Yeah, then you have already a function. But I also think that AI as a service will come not with your data, but with data of companies that have a lot of data.
Right.
And then you just hire the AI service. I want to do facial recognition, or I want to do a marketing campaign. Yeah, and so you just run it on the provider, and you just get the result. So it's definitely an area that is growing, and more and more things will happen on demand. Of course, today, it is still a lot of on-premise mixed with hybrid within the cloud.
Yeah.
And if you want to move things between providers, then probably you're stuck with infrastructure as a service. If you want to do multi-vendor or multi-cloud with PaaS, that means you need to have different routes, to do things in different ways.
Right. So are you saying that big data as a service is essentially nothing but big data external and monetization? No.
I think I'm saying that the whole operational side of the big data, you don't need that on premise. You can do it externally.
Cloudify it, basically.
Yeah, maybe it's not so much for large organizations such as telcos, but for smaller companies, it's definitely going to be the route to go.
All right. Okay, perfect. I want to jump onto our next theme, which is, again, you've got a great exposure working with different countries, different opcos of Telefonica. We talked about Germany and Brazil earlier in the discussion. What industries or sectors, in your experience, have benefited from telco big data? It may be different for different countries. You did point out earlier in the chat, right? It depends on maturity. But what industries or sectors in general can benefit most from telco big data, Richard?
Okay. Well, indeed. So over the years, we have done hundreds of projects with different customers in terms of big data from a telco perspective. And if I come back to what I said in the beginning, so if you anonymize and aggregate telco data, you get mobility data, and you get footfall data, and you have like activity data per antenna, which is all based on location.
Right.
So mobility, footfall, and activity. Now, what you have to do is look at this kind of information for what sectors is that relevant. Now, and of course, transport is very important. Many of our customers are from the transport sector because, for instance, we have as a customer Highway England, who managed all the highways in England in terms of maintenance. And I think 60% of Britain's GDP goes through those highways. So it's very important to understand the traffic, and that's what they can see in our data.
Right.
This data is also very important. Mobility is for tourism. That's where are my customers coming from which province, from which other countries, where are they going, how long do they stay?
Right.
So that's another important sector. Logistics.
Right.
It's also about mobility.
Right.
And then if you but also, for instance, the public administration. In terms of transportation planning. So we help a lot of city governments with where should they build the bridge, or so if they had to set up a new metro line, where to put the stations. That's all about mobility data. Activity data in antennas is very important in terms of, let's say, humanitarian support. If you have a natural disaster, which are increasingly happening more often, unfortunately, flooding, earthquake, heavy rain, landslides. Afterwards, you need to know how are the mobility patterns changed, because that tells you something about the impact of the disaster on people. So that's also very important data for those cases. So if you then look at the more specific type of data, then financial sector is also interested in this kind of data, not so much from the mobility part, but more from the authentication part of data. And then there are sectors like large retail organizations. So for instance, let's take a gas and oil company. He has gasoline stations. Where to put them? Of course, it's best to put them near a road where cars make long distance travels instead of short distance travels. A shopping mall.
Retail is a big one. Of course.
So and all these types of information normally we're getting through surveys and panels. It's sample based, and this mobile data from a telco it's 24/7 during the whole year. It's much more precise, and it's especially much more economic.
So great. I mean, you talked about logistics. You said transport. We said, governments could use it for smart city planning. Tourism is a big one. So are they all kind of generic and sort of common to and we were talking about in a couple of minutes back, we spoke about emerging markets and we said Europe. So are these sectors and industries going to be common, or if I'm an African telco or a Middle Eastern telco, and I'm starting my journey now, where do I start? When you start in Brazil, how did you start, for example, or Chile for that matter?
I think it's also a matter of readiness of the market. It is true. I mean, in such countries that you mentioned, usually capitals are huge. So a huge metropolitan capital with tens of millions of people. Of course, transport is very important in those areas. But as I said before, the market needs to understand that this is an alternative solution for what they've been doing in a different way. And that's a cultural change and challenge that you cannot ignore.
Sure. So you're saying dynamics maturity is, again, it depends on that. Fair enough. All right. I kind of come into my last question now. Previously, we talked about scale, we talked about technology, and now we talked about where do I start, right? What industry, what sector, and it kind of depends on how mature my country is. What are the possible use cases I could take to my B2B customers, for example? What kind of ROI? And at the beginning, Richard, we said entity. We said it should be a separate organization run by a separate leadership. What ROI can we expect from the big data unit? Is there a metric? Is there a number? Again, it may be different for different companies, right?
So, but now you are talking about external monetization only, not about the internal part. Is that right?
Both, actually, but my question was external, but
Well, I think if you look at how can you make money with big data externally or in general, internally, externally, because there are many telco organizations that are large, that have, let's say, maybe in the order of tens of billions of revenue. Of course, if you optimize something in that business using this technology, the benefits are huge. Yeah. So if you are let's say you're a company, a multinational company, operating in 10 countries or between 10 and 20, then probably you invest a few dozens of millions a year. Yeah, almost close to 100 million. And your return on investment after several years, yeah, because you have to get up to speed, you have to scale, might be like triple of that, yeah, 300 million. Yeah. So there is a big uptake, but you need to do it right, yeah, because if you don't do it right, every single application or use case will cost you a lot of effort because you haven't taken care of your data. Yeah. The quality of the format, etc. So you need some basic investments. Yeah? Yeah. But then the benefits are huge. Yeah. Now, if you look at the external part, as we just discussed, yeah, so it's a new business for a telco. It's in a market where you offer something that customers are not used to buy it. They have budget for such things because it solves a similar problem. Right. But so it takes some time to convince the market. Yeah. 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 And therefore, I think for the foreseeable years, let's say 3 to 5 years, personally, I expect that internal return is much higher there than external return. But it is strategic importance to be in the external side, because in the future it will become much bigger. Yeah? When the markets understand really that you can't live without this kind of insights and this kind of data, or you will be not competitive anymore if you don't use the technology. So it will be big, but when exactly is very hard. Yeah, it's very hard to tell. Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting. In fact, I just want to add another thought here, Richard. And I'd love your opinion on that as we kind of close the session now. Telco to techco transformation currently is the new buzzword in the industry, right? And how we see it today is, of course, telcos want to monetize from digital assets. They want to transform themselves into techcos to become more agile and offer, an Amazon-like experience to their customers. Will big data, internal and external, or maybe internal, will big data help us in the telco to techco transformation that we're trying to carry out in the telco today, Richard?
Definitely. Actually, I like this word game, yeah, from telco to techco. I hadn't heard it before, but I think it's very cool. Yes, and I mean, it's part of also the digital transformation. Yeah, telcos need to become more and more technological, yeah, to survive and to stay competitive. Right. The data transformation journey is very important, but not only the data, also the AI transformation journey, which comes immediately after. Yeah. For doing AI, you need to have data, so you need to start this data transformation journey, and that in the end will allow you to do much more things where you take much more value from the technology. Not only buying technology for your operation, but also providing technology to others to help.
Yeah. So you're saying that a technology company has to be AI driven, and that's nothing but being a data centric organization, perhaps AI of things and leveraging big data on that. Yeah. Okay. Perfect.
Yeah. Okay. Indeed. Yeah.
Great. As we now conclude our chat, ladies and gentlemen, I want to very quickly dive into this particular slide. So Richard, with tons of exposure he carries in the big data space and of course in the telecoms industry. He's an author of a great book that I've just ordered, which is, how do we kind of become a data-driven company? And this book covers, 21 lessons on how do we kind of create value from AI. Richard, we'd love a little summary on what are the broad learnings from the book. Thank you. Cheers.
Yeah, thank you, Jay. And indeed, yeah, so I've been working in this area for, I think, 15 or even more years now, and different organizations, and also seen a lot of experiences in many other companies. And what I've seen is that most companies are struggling to make this data journey. So
Right.
Telefonica started in 2011. Yeah, we're now 2022. It's 11 years. We have achieved many things, but there's still a long way to go. There's very little lessons published, where you can read about. This is not the typical lessons about how those big data work for managers.
Right.
This is about very real examples where I've seen companies take decisions and regarding data. And then what this book is about is in those 5 dimensions that you see.
Right.
It discusses what kind of decisions you can expect to take, you need to take, and then it makes an analysis of the different alternatives for the decision,
right,
and also the pros and cons,
right,
related to the phase where you are in. Because as I said before, it's not a one size fits all. Is it good to work with a vendor, yes or no? Well, depends on where you are and on your strategy. If you want to create, let's say, a data team, where do you put it? Do you put it in the IT team, in the strategic team, in the marketing team? So it's all kinds of decisions that company simply, usually they just do it, but not really reflect on, is this the right way to do it? So what I try to do is make those decisions explicit and illustrate them with, actually there's 20 people from other companies also saying something about this.
Right.
And what I've seen is that about 70% of those issues are independent of the sector. They apply to the financial sector, the energy sector, the telco sector.
Right.
Of course. And so I classify it in this, and that is what this book gives to you. So practical advice, if you want to do something, which you can see in the boxes here, then try to learn from others. Then instead of finding it out yourself.
Right. We're running out of time now, but I also know, Richard, that you've been deeply involved with responsible AI and data for good and data ethics. And I see that that's also something that you've covered in the book. Do you want to elaborate a bit on that for our audience, please?
Yes, of course. Actually, so this is the new part, So what I wrote in those in the 4 other dimensions is based on my experience in the past 15 years. What I write in responsibility, it's a new area. So, for instance, what we've done in Telefonica and also doing it is outside Telefonica is when we use AI and big data at scale. There are some things that can happen that you don't want to happen. So they're not intended, but they might happen. Think about potential discrimination that you do with your algorithm. You don't want to do it, but if you don't take care, you might be doing it, or giving too much autonomy to a system, whether it takes decisions with customers or people, maybe that's not the right way because it impacts their life. So it's writing up what are those risks that you might face if you use this technology and you're not careful. And then the fact of what I mean with responsible AI is that you have a methodology in your company that if you use this at scale, then you can use this methodology by design, like privacy by design, security by design. You don't build a system and then you say, oops, something went wrong, which is what we read in the press all the time about this technology. But you do it from the beginning. And at least as an organization, then you are warned. It can still go wrong, but it will not be a surprise. And then you can make all possible adaptations such that it will go in the run in the right direction. So that's what I use. If you use the technology, you should do it in a responsible way. Now, the data for good, or the AI for good area, is that you use this technology actually to solve societal problems, not only business problems, but societal problems. And if you, sometimes it's not so clear, because if you optimize a large city, the transport in a large city, there is a commercial value in that, but of course there is a societal value in it, because you reduce traffic jam, people have less time in traffic, contamination maybe can be reduced, so air quality can go up. So sometimes it's very connected, and I think that's also the future. But it's important to think as a telco, if you have data, of course you have to think in your business, but there's lots of value in your data that you can help your government with to improve society.
And you've kept that as the last pillar. I'm assuming you would do another book and purely focus on data for good in that, since it's an interesting topic and it's important, right? I mean, as we scale up, responsible AI is important going forward. So perfect. Lovely, Richard. Very interesting conversation today. Thank you so much for your time and valuable lessons and learnings that we talked about. Yeah, great. Thank you so much for your time.
Okay, thanks, Jay. To you, it was a pleasure to be here. And well, I hope everybody learned something from it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you, Richard. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Okay. Bye-bye.